Thank you for having me here. It's always a privilege and an emotion to speak in front of this audience. Okay, so I want to start, I want to give you my point of view. I want to start by saying that the future doesn't exist. We just have narratives of the future. And then narratives compete against each other. Attached to every narrative, there are some economic interests. So some companies, some people are gaining from a certain narrative, and some are gaining from another narrative. Then a narrative materializes, and the future becomes present and then past. So now we have a dominant narrative about AI, which is significantly dominant. I will try to give you my view on perhaps a different narrative. Let me start by saying that the main challenges to technological sovereignty are related to the things that AI systems depend on. So computing power, algorithms, and data. So let's start with hardware. As Matteo Valero said before, hardware is a key component of the present systems for AI. And what is happening here? Well, it's really a mess. This is from April to 2025. Trump banned NVIDIA chips in China. And that prompted a reaction. Advancing. Okay. That prompted a reaction because, of course, then NVIDIA would have lost a lot of potential market. And so Trump relaxed the restrictions, imposing a 15% tariff on exports of NVIDIA chips, so not on import. So basically, Trump says he wants to get 15% of all revenues that NVIDIA makes selling things to China. Then what happened again is that, and this was unexpected, China said, we're going to block imports of NVIDIA chips. So the opposite came true. I mean, before it was Trump saying we're not going to export. Then they say, okay, let's export. And China said, no, we must not use NVIDIA chips. Of course, that was to help develop a local industry, Huawei and others. Then the Senate also jumped in. This was maybe 2 weeks ago. The US Senate said, well, you can export to China, but only after all American demand is satisfied. So basically, it's a residual possibility to sell to China. The answer to the answer to this by China actually revived something that happened 1 year ago. 1 year ago, China restricted the export. I mean, all these tensions about imports, exports, etc., with the first tariffs imposed by Trump, China reacted by restricting exports over national security concern, exports of gallium, germanium, antimony, and all rare earth material. And this is happening again. This is happening again. I mean, China uses rare earth as a lever to negotiate in the tariff war. And after China did the restriction now, like it did 1 year ago, then Trump says, well, let's put other 100% tariffs, but this time not on hardware, on software, which is particularly interesting. So hardware may be a lost cause for the present administration. This might indicate that. So they are imposing a 100% tariff and critical software ban. So what software? PyTorch, CUDA, and all this type of software. Most of it is open source. So I don't really know how they plan to exert a ban on open source software. On the other side of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, Huawei started building their chips. They presented recently, that was 3 weeks ago, their roadmap to challenge NVIDIA lead. And they say that their super nodes will be the most powerful computing power for several years. So the lead in hardware may be, the lead of US in hardware may be over. Well, that's what Jensen Huang says. China is nanoseconds behind the US in AI chips, so we should get rid of export restriction. Something like this happened also in the 90s when the e-commerce boom started. The US imposed a ban on the usage of crypto algorithms with long keys, and that didn't last. Because why? Because cryptographic algorithms, RSA, it's knowledge. It's something that you cannot block, and so that did not last. In all this war, we never hear about Apple. The only thing we hear about Apple is that Apple is a laggard, is a loser. But can you imagine that such a smart company, that was the most valuable company until recently, does not have an AI strategy? I mean, is it possible they don't have the money? They don't have the know-how, the competence? As a matter of fact, on the 15th, what day is today? 17? So 2 days ago, Apple introduced the new M5. And I read, with the introduction of neural accelerators in the GPU, M5 delivers a huge boost to AI workload. Brings far more performance and capabilities to MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, and Apple Vision Pro. So they are aiming to a different market, not the data center market, but the laptop and computing market. Okay, that was about what I see happening in hardware. Then let's look at algorithms. First of all, as Rodrigo mentioned before, I think it was Rodrigo, you spoke about benchmark. And benchmarks are very difficult to trust, in my opinion, because benchmarks are made by companies, and these companies have close ties with the industry. It made waves, this news made waves. AI benchmarking organization criticized for waiting to disclose funding from OpenAI. So basically, OpenAI was paying the company that was supposed to assess their their capabilities. And moreover, OpenAI has access to frontier math, but has a verbal agreement with Epoch not to use frontier math problem set to train its AI. So I'm giving you the exam in advance, so you know, but you are not allowed to use it to study. This is what they did. This is what they did. There is an interesting article by some American university, the leaderboard illusion. And I read, in this work, we identify systematic issues that have resulted in distorted playing field. We find that undisclosed private testing practice benefit a handful of providers who are able to test multiple variants before public release and retract scores if desired. We identified 27 LLM variants tested by Meta in the lead up to the Llama 4 release. So basically, they prepare 30 variants, then they test it, and they say, okay, this is the one that passes the benchmarks best, and we draw all the others, and we say this is our model now. So it's cheating. It's cheating at benchmarks. Benchmarks are cheated. Then, how much does it cost to train frontier AI models? As you can see, the cost of we have several phases around AI training and usage. There is the training part, which is the most costly part, and then there is the inference. The inference is when we use the chatbot and we make questions, etc. The training part, the cost of training the computing cost of training has been increasing exponentially. So you see it's a logarithmic scale until 2024. Then in 2025, something happened, and it was the DeepSeek moment in January 2025. So DeepSeek in January released their R1 model, the reasoning model, and they did that a very small organization, really few people have heard of before. And they did that by wisely mixing a number of uh, well-known technologies and well-known practices. So they use some distillation. Distillation is a practice that has started in 1991. So it's not really the latest breakthrough. I'm not going through to explain all of this, but group relative policy optimization is the only innovation that they really introduced, and they did that before in April 2024. So they disclosed this innovation in April 2024, 8 months before presenting their model, and that's open for anyone to read those papers before they release that model. It's open knowledge. They use mixture of experts that was presented in 2013. They introduced multi-latent attention, which is a mixture of different technologies, attention, LoRa and rope, all well known. And then they did something very clever. They used PTX instead of CUDA. Okay, we need to understand what CUDA is. CUDA, I say, is think like using DOS instead of Windows. CUDA is an operating system. Think of it as an operating system that allows programmers to use a cluster of GPUs, like a cluster of processors, like if it was one processor. So it's this software that takes care of balancing the load on all the rest of the processors. And this is the de facto, CUDA is the de facto relevant thing for the dominance of NVIDIA. So it's the monopolistic lever of NVIDIA, because once you have a cluster and you use CUDA and you need to add more computing power, you are going to buy NVIDIA chips because CUDA is by NVIDIA. So it's like the tie between the operating system and the machines. Should an antitrust authority decide that this tie between CUDA and the hardware is illegal and open up CUDA, NVIDIA would have serious problems because everyone could compete and grab some market share. PTX is, instead of working at such high level, they go directly to talk to the various GPUs. And then they did something very stupid, I mean, very easy. In the end, neural networks are a lot of sums and multiplication on numbers. And instead of using numbers represented with 32 bits, they use numbers represented with 8 bits, so 1/4. The results of this clever mixture of innovation that, as I said, they were all known before DeepSeek released their model, and they were all known by everyone in the industry, is that they use 93% less memory, 58% computing power in training, and 90% less computing power in inference. And this shocks, because somehow it goes to the foundation of the idea that you need to have what I call the castles of AI that are vertically integrated, where you do research, you go from the research to the provision of the service. Somehow this broke this thing. Of course, they released DeepSeek as an open weight model, open source model. Now, how much did it cost? Oh, there was some reactions, but by the industry. One of the practices that Microsoft used in the past that was documented in antitrust cases at Microsoft is what they call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so the first reaction was to generate FUD against DeepSeek, saying, oh, but you can, if you ask them about Tiananmen, they will not say that the model will not reply what happened in Tiananmen. But in the same period, if you ask ChatGPT who Biden or Trump were, it didn't answer. So we had censorship. I'm going faster. Well, we know how much it costs to train the model. We now know it's an article published on Nature, $294,000. This slide is important. This is the Oliver Goldman, head of product for OpenAI platform. they say about distillation is the process of taking a very large smart frontier model and using that model to teach a smaller model, very capable in specific tasks. And it's super cheap and super fast to execute. This is Berkeley University. Train your own O1 preview model with $450. Why? Because you start from distillation. Once you have built the foundation model, like Rodrigo is doing in Chile, you can use that to derive very cheap models that run on very cheap machines. So the whole idea of data centers, and this does not stop there. The whole idea of data center is maybe related to a specific narrative of the AI as a castle, everything built vertically integrated and not open source, etc. Now, DeepSeek V3 runs 20 tokens per second on a Mac Studio, on a computer you can buy in a computer shop right in front of us. And it didn't stop there. Recently, DeepSeek released the V3 experimental model in less than 3 cents per 1 million input tokens. So the software is evolving at such a speed, making it very, very cheap to create new models starting from foundation models. What is happening? China built hundreds of AI data centers and now may stand unused. SoftBank and OpenAI announced this 500 billion AI project. You might remember Altman talking next to Trump about the Stargate project. 500 billion. How did it end up? It ended up, they said, okay, we're going to start with the 100 billion, then 100 million, and now they are building a small data center in Ohio. But still, it's the announcement. Most of the deals we read of today, 100 billion here, 300 billion there, are just announcements, are just memorandum of understanding, no real money. And if I buy something from him and he buys something from me, no real money again is involved. And apparently somebody's starting to notice the market economics of the data center investment boom by The Economist. If we look at the margins, Oracle, just to read the bottom phrase, we don't have time. In some cases, Oracle was losing considerable amount of money on rentals of smaller quantity of NVIDIA chips. So the narrative might be different from the dominating narrative. Fact is that AI is everywhere. Old AI is beating new AI, what I call the boring AI. Meta made more than 18 billion in profit last quarter, but it wasn't the kind of AI everyone was talking about. There is a disconnect. On one side, where the hype and the money are flowing toward generative AI and large language models. On the other hand, is where companies are actually seeing results. Traditional, less splashy, and non-generative techniques. I remember when Netscape Navigator was released. I was the first distributor of Netscape in Europe. And talking to Andreessen, I asked, how are you going to make money if you give this out for free? And he said, I'm going to make money out of the server. And he was selling the web server for $1 million per license, $1 million per license of web server. Okay, he didn't sell one. He didn't sell one in Europe, not that I know of. Why? Because the web server is open source and everybody could use it. Now we have web servers everywhere, in these microphones and the lamps everywhere. So the value has been captured by subject players that are different from those that were leading the leading narrative in the 2000s, and it might happen again. So my conclusion: boring AI is going to be everywhere, and it does not cost that much. Open weight and open model redesign, and open source models redesign business models. And probably, well, I don't have time. We should invest in knowledge. You know, DeepSeek engineers, China has withdrawn their passport. So they are not allowed to leave China again. And so there is a shift from the hardware to the knowledge. I think that we're going to see a rise of dedicated small language models running on PCs and distilled from foundation models. There is an issue about the business model. I have some doubt that LLMs can be ad sponsored. So the conversion rate now, I have to say this, sorry, the conversion rate for Microsoft for Copilot and for OpenAI is less than 2%, meaning that 100 users use it for free and less than 2 pay for that. Of course, we have this type of model where you use things for free because advertisement pays. I have some doubts that advertisement will be enough to pay for LLM provided as a service for free. So that'd be something against that business model. So cooperation, investing in knowledge and cooperation, and possibly, if you have the resources, better at the regional level, try to develop an open weight model to base all other developments. Thank you.